Now we're taking a look at the League Two weekend, and there's a ton of storylines, to be quite honest, but we cannot ignore the runaway leaders, Walsall, because we've been chatting this morning, George, off the back of their 4-2 win against MK Dons, which makes it 9 wins in a row with an aggregate scoreline of 22 goals to 6. They are so good. They are picking up so many points. They are so far clear that it's time to have a discussion about whether Walsall are the best League Two team that we've covered, and potentially the best League Two team since, well, Northampton got 99 points under Chris Wilder, 15-16. There hasn't been a team that's got 100 points in the last 20 years. I mean, is this a legitimate conversation to be having about this Walsall side?
Yes. There'll be some who say that Northampton weren't even the best side in League Two that season, but I'll leave that for another time.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. It's I would probably counter it a little bit by saying if Stockport, Wrexham, Mansfield from last season were in League Two, would Walsall be as far clear as they are? I think in comparison to the rest of the league, I think they absolutely are. I haven't seen a team this dominant compared to everybody else ever. And the means by which they've been doing it is so impressive, as we'll get to. And the most impressive thing for me is you look at certainly what Wrexham did last season. You look at the quality of player they had at their disposal and everything else. And often a good team can be a collection of good players steered ably by a manager. With this, it just feels like we've found a guy in Matt Sadler who, in a very short period of time of being a football manager, has devised a playing style that has effectively elevated the performance of individuals in his team, but made them impossible to play against. And that, for me, is probably the most exciting thing.
I loved how, in beating MK 4-2 on the weekend, it was the guy playing up top with Jamil Matt that scored, but not Nathan Lowe, because he's back at Stoke for now. Obviously, the fact that he started for Stoke and played for Stoke on the weekend means the only teams that he can play for between now and the end of the season are Stoke City and Walsall, which keeps the door open for a return. He can't play for anyone else on loan. But it was Albert Adoma, amazingly, who now plays up top with Jamil Matt, two blokes right at the end of their career, rather than Lowe scoring 15 goals in his first full senior season or half season. And they're just still doing it. And I think that, Nathan Lowe was keen to give Jamil Matt a ton of praise when I interviewed him when he won Young Player of the Month. And I think it is worth flagging that in Jamil Matt you have one of the great sort of team players in League Two from the last 10 years. You get strikers like Andy Cook, who are clearly better goal scorers, more potent. But if you look at Matt, it's easy to forget that he was a starting striker for Forest Green when they won the league a couple of years ago. And again, he wasn't getting the headlines because it was Matty Stevens who was scoring all the goals. And I think there's something in strikers at League Two level, as we discussed with Nathan Lowe, very few of them are all-rounders. So in order to have a striker that is scoring at a very prolific level, you probably need to have a foil for them doing some of the other stuff that they don't do so well, because strikers are going to find it hard to do everything themselves. So in the same way that when Dom Telford won the Golden Boot, he had Courtney Baker-Richardson doing all of the physical stuff. It's kind of the same with this Walsall side and with what Jamil Matt's doing. I mean, I think in order to kind of analyse them further and maybe stop saying the words Nathan and Lowe, which at the moment aren't relevant, there's so much else to discuss here, George, and we can use FOTMob, we can hit the FOTMob corner button to best analyse this team that you have just said, make it almost impossible to play against them. And I think it's time to stop saying the words Nathan and Lowe, because right now they aren't relevant to this Walsall side, and he had no hand in their resounding 4-2 win against MK on Saturday. So George, instead, let's use the word FOTMob and hit the FOTMob corner button, and using their stats and data, they can help us explain why, in your words, this team have become almost impossible to play against, and in my words, possibly the most efficient League Two side I've ever seen.
Let's do it. Firstly, when you're looking at how good a team are, the goals for and the goals against column can tell you quite a lot. And Walsall averaged the most goals per game in the whole league, 2.1 goals per game. That is way clear of Notts County and Chesterfield, who both have 1.6 goals per game. So they're scoring 0.5 more goals per game than any other team in the league. And they are fourth for goals conceded per 90 at 0.9, so averaging less than a goal conceded per game as well. Now, normally these days in modern football, when you have a side who are that dominant, their possession numbers are normally very high. Yet Walsall have the 23rd highest possession, so the second lowest possession in the whole of League Two. 42.1% possession on average. That is only higher than Bromley in the division. And unbelievably, this translates itself to a relentless attacking threat. They top the league for expected goals, 46.7 expected goals. That has accounted for 52 total goals. So they are overperforming a little bit. But even if they'd scored 46.7 goals, so call it 46 or 47, they would still be the top scorers in the league by quite a long way. They are top for shots on target per game, 5.2 per 90, clear of MK Dons on 4.9. And they're still third for big chances missed. So it kind of shows that it's not just Nathan Lowe being an elite finisher being the key reason why they are able to be so strong. And it's when you look at their games in isolation that it really becomes apparent just how efficient they are. And efficient is so important in terms of being the right word for it. You look at the 4-2 win over MK Dons on Saturday, 33% possession, 3.31 expected goals. You look at the shot map and theirs is just dotted around the left channel of the 6-yard box and penalty area, compared to MK Dons, who for all of their 67% possession, for all of their 424 accurate passes, only mustered 6 shots and 0.49 expected, compared to Walsall, who 25 shots for their 150 accurate passes. So some quick maths will tell you that is a shot for every 6 accurate pass, which is absolutely ridiculous in terms of chance creation. And that isn't in isolation. That isn't a one-off. We saw them beat Tranmere 5-1 a couple of weeks ago. Tranmere down to 10 men for quite a lot of that game. Doesn't matter. Tranmere still had more of the ball, even though they were down to 10 men for within the first half. Again, Walsall just 246 accurate passes, 21 shots, 2.86 expected goals, 5 goals scored. Move on to the 2-0 win over Newport County the other day. Newport had 67% possession at Walsall, yet 4 shots, 0.18 expected goals for their 426 passes, whereas Walsall 162 accurate passes, 13 shots, 2 goals. Like they don't need the ball, and that is what for me is so impressive and why Sadler is so good at it. And then you have the big extreme where you had Notts County travelling to Walsall a couple of months ago. Walsall have done the double over Notts County this season, and even at home against Notts County, a side who know love to keep the ball, they won the game 3-2. Notts County was 76% possession, 555 passes, 131 accurate passes for Walsall, 22 shots, 7 on target, 3 goals to win the game 3-2. So this is a side who effectively are incredibly happy to let the opposition have the ball, have an ability to concede possession and yet prevent the opposition from getting anywhere near creating any good chances, and then when they're in possession of the football can progress into the final third with relative ease. When they're in the final third, can create chances, and when they're in front of goal, can finish them off too. It is. It feels like football that's been solved at this level by Matt Sadler, and you know, whilst it may not be the kind of free-flowing attacking football that's become in vogue at the moment, I do wonder if the fact that a lot of teams like to play that way has played into Sadler's hands, where he's thought, well, there's an opportunity here to be the best out of possession team in the league, the best side to progress the ball quickly, and we're going to be that, and he's managed to pull it off with aplomb.
I feel bad for jumping on one phrase that you used in what was incredible analysis. I would say it is free-flowing attacking football. It's certainly fast-flowing and incredibly attacking, in the sense that as soon as they have the football, they attack instantly, and they don't need to spend time building an attack, because they are, you know, they instantly, in particular, love to get the ball out wide. And whether it's Taylor Allen delivering from deep, the left-sided centre-back who steps forward into kind of midfield areas, whether it's Gordon, who's more of a dribbler and can get to the byline, or Connor Barrett on the right-hand side, who's similar, really good at beating his opposing fullback and getting crosses in. You know, they are able to get balls into the box. But instead of, you know, I criticised Wrexham earlier for being having too much of an onus on crossing. but it doesn't feel the same with Walsall, partly because I think they get more bodies inside the box. The number 8s in this system are so good at getting inside the box and both attacking crosses with the two strikers, but also kind of picking up the scraps and the second balls when balls are only half cleared. So absolutely brilliant and efficient in attack, sensational out of possession as well. Basically a complete force field around their box and their goal. They barely allow the opposition anywhere near their goal. The XG conceded number is very, very healthy. Only 3 teams have conceded fewer expected goals this season. Interestingly, when it comes to saves per match, Walsall's keepers are the least busy, with only 1.4 saves per match being made this season. And maybe, without being too harsh, maybe that's not the worst thing, because per FOTMob, Tommy Simpkin, who's the Walsall keeper on loan from Stoke, he actually has the 3rd worst save percentage at 57.7% of any League Two goalkeeper. Now, that is partly because Walsall defend with the highest line in League Two. They have this incredible mixture of they have this incredible high line and then so much compactness within it, where they do just suffocate the opposition. But I think that probably it doesn't help Simkin in terms of his save percentage, because as we saw with Scott Hogan, for example, who beat the offside trap and the ball over the top and then finished well, the chances that they do concede are often where their defence has been turned and where they don't have many bodies defending between the guy taking the shot and the goal. So don't want to be too harsh on Simpkin, and I have noticed he's made some quite big saves recently, so I think he's grown into this this loan at Walsall. But it's basically just defence as another form of attack as well. Because of this high line, they suffocate opponents. They are exceptionally good at winning the ball back high up the pitch, the most in the league in terms of winning possession in the final third, just above Accrington and MK Dons. And you need players with the physicality and the stamina and the desire to keep working hard, be tenacious and win the ball back. And probably no one sums that up better than Jamie Jealous, who stands out massively in this very attacking, aggressive, pressing number 8 role that he has. He shows that he's got the goal threat. You know, you look at his numbers, he's got a great goals return this season, takes a lot of shots, hits the target more than almost any other midfielders at this level. His expected assist number shows that he's creative as well, often drifting to the right side and helping Barrett out on the right-hand side as they build and look to get balls into the box. But it's defensively and it's in his pressing where, again, Jealous just fits this team perfectly. He's won a load of tackles. He intercepts the ball. He makes blocks. He makes recoveries. He wins the ball back in the final third. He really epitomises this Walsall side, and you could say that about a number of them as well. So I couldn't love them anymore. Couldn't be much more impressed with the manager and with the individuals that are demonstrating such a high level. As you say, last season's top 3 were pretty immense. Stockport, Wrexham and Mansfield. Stockport's goal difference was plus 48. Mansfield's was plus 43. It's pretty impressive, but Walsall are on course for plus 53. And, you know, they're currently at 2.3 points per game. That would hit about 106, 107 points. It's normal to see League Two promotion contenders just drop off a little bit. It's rare that teams maintain this level of form throughout the season, hence why no one has hit 100 points for over 20 years. But in order to hit 100 points, they only need to pick up, I say only, they need to pick up 2 points per game from this point. And the way that they're playing, and the fact that no team seem to have found a way to counteract it at this moment in time, means that you wouldn't bet against them, that's for sure. Walsall leading the way in League Two, and subject to FOTMob Corner this week. FOTMob has so many stats for players, for teams. All 3 EFL leagues, has complete XG data as well. It's the number 1 scores app for a match day. It's a fantastic app, one of me and George's favourite that we use every single day. You can download FOTMob using the link in the show notes. So I watched a League 2 game on Saturday between Carlisle and Bradford, and Bradford won it 1-0. And I think they deserved to win, and they created 2 big chances, one in the first half that Patterson put wide, one in the second half that Kavanagh scored, and it was an impressive away win for them where they haven't been so good on the road this season. But I wasn't really watching for Bradford, I was mainly watching for Carlisle. That's because they have signed 8 players already in January, the most in the EFL by a margin. They have been waiting for January to buy players to play Mike Williamson's style of football. in the time that they've had to wait for this, about a dozen games or more, they have not won very many, and they start January bottom of the table. So I watched this game because I wanted to see how quickly new signings could be kind of implemented into a team, and see how quickly Carlisle could start looking like anything other than doomed for relegation. And on this evidence, I'm not 100% sure that it is going to happen overnight. There were 6 January signings in the starting 11. Then you've also got Kadeem Harris, who joined a couple of months ago. You've got Gabriel Breeze in goal, who's taken the gloves off Harry Lewis. It is a real new look Carlisle side. And I would say, as a positive, it's very clear that you've got round pegs in round holes now. Mike Williamson's, the way he sets his team up is incredibly consistent. You're generally going to have 1 number 9, 2 number 10s, 2 number 6s, wing-backs who he likes to be basically wingers, really attacking types, and then 3 centre-backs. And I think on paper, this team looks a lot better. Certainly in terms of the number 10s, Embleton and Stephen Weirn, who are going to understand that role a lot better than those that were playing beforehand. Certainly in terms of the wing-backs, Jones and Harris, who I thought were their best players on the day, and I think at this level are pretty good attacking wing-backs. At centre-back, I think the new lad on loan from Newcastle, MacArthur, looked pretty good in possession as a left-sided centre-back, but he was found wanting in the build-up to Bradford's goal, and they do seem to have a rick in them. Whoever plays at centre-back for Carlisle seems to struggle to avoid kind of quite costly defensive lapses, and that was the case in the build-up to Bradford's goal. So I kind of wanted to see more green shoots, more positivity, because I think for Carlisle to suffer back-to-back relegations would be frankly pretty horrific, and I do just find them quite a fascinating team to analyse at the moment, because new ownership came in, did some great things, said all the right things, and put their money where their mouths were in terms of investing in the playing squad, but it hasn't worked at all. So it's not so much the level of ambition being shown, but the quality of the decision making, and maybe some of the timing of the decisions that they've made in terms of when to stick or twist with Paul Simpson, when to bring Mike Williamson in, and how much they're now backing him in January when they're in such a perilous position. I'm incredibly nervous for them. I didn't see a huge amount to like, but I'm kind of looking forward to checking back in and watching their game. I think against Gills, I've got earmarked in February to try and see if another 4 or 5 games worth of these players playing together can see them look a little bit more coherent, because they have got a lot of work to do. 7 points away from survival right now, Carlisle. A big win for Bradford, and just as well, George, because there's a really quick pace being set at the top of the league. Obviously, Walsall won, but so did Crewe, Port Vale, Wimbledon, Notts County, Doncaster. Should we talk about Notts winning 3-0 at Accrington, and probably the goal of the day from George Abbott?
Incredible goal, and so many different angles for us to enjoy it from. Just a corner played deep into a corner from the left side, played deep into the right hand corner of the penalty box, and he's there and meets it first time on the volley and sends it absolutely fizzing into the top left hand corner. A ridiculous strike, a very unique goal, one that's obviously was kind of planned in terms of the makeup of it, but also the talent and the execution of it was just phenomenal. A really, really special goal from a player that in his first loan from Spurs at League Two level has kind of settled into the role incredibly well. He's someone whose quality on the ball is really impressive, but it's also, for a 19-year-old, he's a really effective presser. He breaks play down very well. He's not just a ball player, and often I think academy grads coming down from Premier League clubs can find that part of the game a bit of a shock, especially at League Two level, where he's absolutely not the case with him. So yeah, a moment of quality from a loanee who's destined, I would say, for pretty big things, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a championship loan next season. You wouldn't think. But yeah, Notts County were pretty good on the day. They're a team who are, there are, as you say, a lot of teams at the top end of the League Two table who are pretty relentless in terms of picking up points. Obviously, last time seen being beaten 2-1 at home by Walsall, so this was a good way to return to decent form, and did so. They beat Swindon 2-0 in between the two.
How do you start good value to work out the departure of Daniel Crowley and how much of an impact that will have on them? I mean, in terms of being able to create when on the ball, they're possibly no one better at this level, which feels damaging. And yet, when you look at what's left behind, I'd still expect them to be a very good attacking team. And it's probably out of possession where Crowley doesn't offer very much. So is there any potential that Notts could be either barely impacted or possibly become a better team like net because they might be a little more aggressive out of possession, or is that kind of fanciful?
Maybe. I think it will probably depend to an extent. You'd assume they're going to reinvest the money from Crowley and bring in someone to replace him. Whether or not that's successful, we'll have to see. But I would probably argue that in the same way that we overemphasise the impact that transfers can have on teams in the short term, we also probably overemphasise how much of an impact a player leaving will have on a team. Obviously, there will be a significant impact to an extent of a key player moving on. But the actual tangible points difference probably isn't as much as we would necessarily think. So he's obviously a loss. He's someone who, as you say, in terms of being an on-ball creator, but also a goal threat too. He was as good a kind of attacking midfield player as you're really going to get in terms of doing both of those things. So, but they've got players who can step in, and as I say, given the fee they receive from him, I'm sure we'll see them reinvest that.
Yeah, Crew just keep on trucking. Another clean sheet. So good defensively. This one at Morecambe. I mean, partly down to some wastefulness for Morecambe, who did have at 0-0 quite a few good looks at goal. But there's just something about this Crew side. They're able to keep the opposition at bay. They are very rarely like completely dominant in terms of the ball and territory from the first whistle. There's just something about their character, their ability to get stronger as the game progresses rather than go the other way. And no surprise really to see them get to 0-0, overcome some chances for Morecambe, and then execute a good attack themselves, get ahead on 68 minutes, and see it out when they did. It's the sort of thing we've seen a lot from them this season and last. Chris Long, who's had such a terrible time with injuries, with a really nice finish, diverting a low Ryan Cooney cross for another Crew Alex win. They're still second in the league. Wimbledon are the team with the second best PP, same way that a Notts County are, but they do get it done. And in this instance, it was a fantastic solo goal from Josh Neufville, the right wing-back, who stood up his full-back, who came inside the full-back and then fired into the top corner with his left foot. The sort of, I watch quite a lot of Dons, and Neufville gets the ball a lot 1v1, and he's very, very good at, with a bit of pace and a bit of skill, getting to the position where he can put a cross in or sometimes get a shot off. His technical execution isn't great, which is why he's playing in League Two rather than the Championship. And so he can be quite a frustrating player to watch, I think, for fans who don't like seeing overhit crosses, for example. But I always think it's worth pointing out that there aren't very many players who put themselves in those positions with the quality of the skill and the speed that he has. And so it's one of those situations where you're like, you can see the overhit crosses and therefore you get frustrated because you don't think this is a good player. But there are other wing-backs, full-backs, wingers at this level who don't get into the position to put in those crosses because they don't have the dynamism and the speed and the skill in the first place. So what do you want? Someone who actually gets to those positions and sometimes delivers quality but often doesn't, or those who just can't put themselves in those positions because they aren't good enough in terms of speed and skill. Certainly good enough here. Josh Neufville and Matty Stevens' pen made it 2-0. More misery for Tranmere, who are just teetering above the relegation zone. Any sort of improved form for Morecambe or Carlisle, it could well be an absolute disaster for them because they look terrible at the moment, Tranmere. I wanted to know a bit about Port Vale 3, Newport 2, George.
Yeah, Newport are the entertainers at the moment, aren't they? Every game that Newport have seems to be very high scoring, and I kind of like the way they approach these games, where they know they're probably going to be second best, but throwing caution to the wind and trying to hurt the opposition and squeak ahead has yielded some pretty big results from this season. And then kind of nearly did it again here. They took the lead early on through Bobby Camwell with a header from a corner. Player who scored a hat trick earlier on in the season. Ben Garrity made it 1-1 with his own header from a corner. It was pretty end-to-end, pretty chaotic, and that's what Newport games for the most part are. Cameron Evans making it 2-1 to Newport
from a corner
after half an hour or so, from a header from a corner. And at 2-1, after an hour or so, Port Vale was staring down the barrel, having picked up such an important win at Doncaster to kind of return to form. But they knuckled down and were the dominant force the last half an hour or so. Jaden Stockley making it 2-2 before Jaheim Headley scoring his first goal for the club, having joined from Huddersfield just a week or so ago, joining up with his former boss Darren Moore, who should be, you'd think, a pretty good signing for the level. He's had some decent loans in the past. So, yeah, definitely for Port Vale, they'll feel like it was deserved in the end, given the way that they laid down the marker to Newport in the last 25-30 minutes or so, but certainly caused them a bit of a scare. And as I say, I do like the fact, Newport are certainly a team who, need points on the board in order to keep themselves away from the relegation zone. But I kind of like their approach, where it's, they go into games looking to hurt the opposition rather than setting back. It means they're going to concede loads of chances and that they're going to concede a lot of goals. But I'd probably rather see them approach it that way than rolling over.
Yeah. I mean, I realise they've scored 2 goals at Vale Park, which is impressive, even if both were some set-piece situations. But I never feel that convinced by them going forward, to be honest. So although I don't disagree that it's a perfectly good approach to attack rather than defend, attack being the best form of defence, but they're not very good at it. So,
but it's interesting that their fixtures have fallen very weirdly, where they've already won 5 home games this season. Of those, you've got Crewe who are 4th, Salford who are 5th, Doncaster who are 8th, MK Dons who are 12th. The only team they've played currently in the bottom half, the 2 teams have played in the bottom half at home, are Accrington and Fleetwood. They beat Accrington 3-1 and they beat Fleetwood 0-0. So still to come, they've got Cheltenham at home.
Unbelievable.
Sorry, they drew 0-0. They have still got Cheltenham, Colchester, Gillingham, Barrow, Swindon, Harrogate, Tranmere, Morecambe and Carlisle all to come at home. So I think they'll be fine.
Okay. Gills Doncaster, Donny have won 1-0 here. Big away win for them and keeping the pace with others who are winning around them. For me, I was more interested in Gillingham's performance. To my eyes, playing better than I've seen them play for a good few months. Possibly even one of their better home performances. This is very much at 0-0. The issue was there was a glaring error from Armani Little, who tried to head it back to the goalkeeper, didn't put nearly enough on it, and Lee Molyneux ran forward and dinked the goalkeeper and put Doncaster ahead. And at that point, I felt like Gillingham's response was really disappointing. So I'm trying to look at the positives, which is that I do believe they looked a bit more lively going forward at 0-0, and I think they probably had the better of the game to an extent. But their response to going behind, it just shows how fragile the mentality is amongst the squad at the moment, and that's what John Conway's got to contend with. It was quite an eye-catching debut from Palace loanee Asher Agbenone, who had a couple of moments where he gets the ball, he twists and turns and bursts away from defenders, and the final product wasn't great, but made me pretty excited about his skill and his ball-carrying ability, so something to watch there. Also caught my eye, Fleetwood's win at Salford, 2-0, obviously snapping Salford's incredible run of form, and maybe getting Fleetwood going again now under Pete Wild. But it wasn't necessarily the fact they were 2-0 up early here, with both goals coming from set pieces. The fact that from that point, they basically completely shut Salford down. Salford team, who obviously have some great players in Stockton and Kuyasi. They've now got Longello, who's a player I like. Forner in midfield I like. McElhenney is a threat as well. And Fleetwood just weren't phased at all. Salford didn't have a shot after the 55th minute, which, when they're chasing the game at home, really, really impressive from Fleetwood. Swindon and Harrogate, big winners down at the bottom, George, with most of the bottom teams losing. Swindon beating Barrow 2-0. Now, ordinarily, I'd be doing a big bit on Swindon here, and I think that will come on the pod in the next couple of weeks, because I am really impressed with what Ian Holloway has done since arriving, with how this team looks. So much better. But they're not the story in this game, because the defeat for Barrow meant it was just 9 points from 15 games. Stephen Clements has been sacked, and as we record, they have appointed former Oxford United legend Andy Wing as their manager. Now, you're going to have to tell me a bit about
his second comment on the pod.
You're going to have to tell me a bit about Wingy. Before then, let me just touch on Clements' departure. It's not one that I have a huge amount of or any qualms with, really. The team has looked really, really poor, and I don't feel like Clements has shown that he had any particularly tangible ideas for how to make them look better. And that's now 2 jobs at Gillingham and now Barrow in the last year or so, where Clements has really underwhelmed, certainly in terms of results, where 55 games across the 2 spells, 22 defeats and 17 wins, 1.22 points per game, and going forward with both teams, really tough to watch. Now, both Gills and Barrow, we're not talking about teams with poor budgets and poor players here, so For Clements, he's not put himself in a great position in terms of what his next job will be. He's obviously very highly rated as a coach. Certainly been linked with Steve Bruce in the past, so I wouldn't be that surprised to see him maybe get sort of submerged into the warm bosom of Steve Bruce at Blackpool now, because some quite good stuff out of possession earlier in the season with Barrow, but even that fell away a little bit and just never got the attack going at all. So he's been sacked. Kind of interested by Barrow's second half of the season and beyond. What happens with them, George? What's Andy Wing?
All we want is a team of Andy Wings, a team of Andy Wings, a team of Andy Wings. And then we sing, number 1 is Andy Wing, number 2 is Andy Wing, number 3 is Andy Wing. I'm not going to do all of them, but you get the gist. Yeah. And that's the kind of character he is. There's your analysis. Someone who, as a player at Oxford, was immensely popular for his all-action, his ridiculous effort as both a right-back and holding midfielder for the club. The kind of player that, as a fan, you kind of want an Andy Wing in your side, because he'd never let you down. And he's been really impressive at Solihull. He played at Oxford at a time where Darryl Eales was our owner. Darryl now owns Solihull, so it kind of made sense that Oxford connection would mean he'd get the job there. Took Solihull to the very brink. Well, they had that ridiculous April or May last season, where he took them to both the cup final and the playoff final, and they lost both on penalties, which is absolutely horrendous. But someone who has clearly elevated Solihull as a club, and I'd be lying if I pretended I'd seen his Solihull Moors team play, so I'm not going to do that. But certainly someone who's very highly rated and regarded within football, and I'm excited to see how he gets on. Obviously, the Mike Williams recruitment from the National League, not Mike Williamson recruitment from the National League, looked very smart initially and has tailed off relatively quickly. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on.
Harrogate beat Cheltenham 2-0 on Friday night. 2 own goals, 2 set pieces, 2 own goals. Luke Young and Scott Bennett giving Harrogate a helping hand. What is now back-to-back wins, with them having beaten Barrow previously as well. So Harrogate, another team who quite regularly look very poor in matches, but who are kind of seem like relatively comfortable in their skin. And I think that could be something where Carlisle, for example, and Tranmere, for example, are going to struggle with just the fact of being in a League Two relegation scrap when they weren't necessarily expecting it. Whereas I think there's something in Harrogate who are fairly comfortable doing this. They've done it before, and they seem able to pick up wins even when you don't necessarily expect it. They did that on Friday night against Cheltenham, and a really impressive away win for Colchester at Bromley. I said keep an eye on Bromley last week in the mid-season predictions. We'll just keep an eye on Colchester as well, because they're not conceding many.
Who shouldn't we keep an eye on?
They're barely conceding any goals, and this was a bit like Fleetwood. What catches the eye away from home, taking the lead in the 4th minute, which with what was quite a surprisingly simple goal scored by Edwards, set out by Lyle Taylor, with the Bromley defensive shape unusually open. And then away at Bromley, a team who've been in good form recently, only 4 shots Bromley managed in the second half. Most of those from set-piece situations as well. So Collier's defensive shape, pretty immaculate at the moment, up there with the best in the division. They haven't scored very many goals. I'd like to see Tavide back from injury soon, because I think they lack just something at the top of the pitch that he could help them with. But certainly much more impressed with Collier over the last couple of months, which is pleasing, as I nailed my colours to the mast pre-season for a much better season. Grimsby won, Chesterfield won, was a result at Blundell Park. We saw Jordan Davies score the opener for Grimsby, cancelled out by Tom Naylor for a 1-1 draw. And that concludes the League Two recap. Thanks for listening to Not the Top 20 podcast this week. I'm trying to stick on a couple of strong themes across the EFL leagues. We're now into the second half of the season, and we feel like the in-depth match-to-match stuff can just be dialed down a tiny bit, and the bigger themes and the bigger narratives and the bigger storylines now take on even more importance as the games start to run out, as we start getting to, yes, the business end of the season. Thanks to FOTMob for sponsoring the FOTMob Corner segment and the Monday pod. Cheers to you for listening. We'll be back again on Thursday with a betting show. Cheers. Go well.